Here now is Chief Meteorologist Tom Sorrells with Talk to Tom.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Talk to Tom. I'm Chief Meteorologist Tom Sorrells. I can't thank you enough for tuning in on this Thursday afternoon. We are every Thursday right here on WKMG between 5:30 and 6. And, of course, you can always stream us around the world, no matter where you are, on News 6 Plus. Please download our app. It's free. Okay. Coming up, I'm going to talk to a climate expert who says climate change is already being felt right here in Central Florida. I think you already know that, but he'll explain a little bit more about what we see happening now, what is going on now, and we will address something that we use here called the Climate Shift Index. I hope he makes it a little more clear for us all. But first, as we do every week, we want to take your weather questions. You can always submit a question at clickorlando.com/talk to Tom. We would love to have you on. This week, I'd like to introduce you to a new friend to the program. We welcome to our airwaves now, Rachel Christian. Hey, Rachel, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right, Rachel, where are you from? Where do you live?
I'm actually from Orlando, live in Orlando.
You live downtown somewhere?
Yeah, actually just south of there.
All right, well, cool. We've never met. I don't know what you're interested in, but you're going to talk to us on Talk to Tom. So fire, what's your weather question? Let me have it.
Yeah, Tom, so I've always wondered, why does it rain almost every single day in the summertime?
Oh, great question. People, are you from here originally? You grew up here?
Yeah.
Okay, here's what I get from people a lot, Richard. I get from people a lot. I used to be able to set my clock by the afternoon storms. They either come at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock, and I would know they'd hit at 3 o'clock, and they would be done by 5. I could set my clock by it. Now I really can't. Well, here's the deal. It hasn't really changed. The afternoon storms are still the afternoon storms, and they still run in cycles to where sometimes they're starting at 2, sometimes they're starting at 3, sometimes they linger till about 7 or 8. Here's the deal. We live on a peninsula, as you know, right here in the heart of Central Florida, where we get an East Coast sea breeze coming in from the East Coast and a West Coast sea breeze coming in every afternoon. Depending on the steering currents aloft, that's what determines where these two sea breezes collide. Most of the time, we have the Bermuda High controlling us during the summertime, gives that East Coast sea breeze an early jump, and the colliding sea breezes happen right over top of Central Florida, right along the I-4 corridor. So since they collide there and hit and lift, that's the reason that we get all the storms every afternoon. Colliding sea breezes, abundant moisture. That's it. It's that simple. We're in a unique place in America to where we get rain showers just about every afternoon, if not every third afternoon, for about 6 months out of the year. Have you noticed any changes in the time you grew up here, or so as an adult now? Don't you think it still looks the same as it did when you were young? Not the land.
A little bit, yeah.
I know the city's grown up and all the businesses have grown up, but the weather's kind of the same, except it's just this much hotter. Don't you think?
Yeah, definitely. Especially this year, earlier, February and March, it was really hot for that time of year.
Way too warm, way too early. Surely you look like a young person to me. Like, you do remember Christmas time when you were a kid, though, when we had some cold Christmases here in Central Florida, and we just don't have that much anymore. We just don't really get cold. Remember that old Tom Petty song about a Southern accent when he said, "I might go work Orlando if those orange groves don't freeze." Well, A, they don't freeze here now, and B, we don't have oranges anymore. We just really don't. Not in Orange County. Hey, Rachel, thank you so much for being on Talk to Tom this week. I appreciate it. Thank you for watching. Thank you for submitting your question and going through the trouble of being here for us live. I really appreciate it.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's nice talking to you. Bye-bye now.
Bye.
All right, Rachel was great. We have another question comes to us from our friend Mel Torres. Mel wants to ask, why or how is Florida the lightning capital of the U.S. or the world? Okay, Mel, I appreciate you saying the U.S. or the world, because we are not the lightning capital of the world. We are the lightning capital of North America, normally. Somewhere in Florida almost always gets that title. From time to time, the title will shift because they base this on squirrel mileage. And so sometimes there'll be a little place in the Mississippi Panhandle or Louisiana that will have per square mile for like 5 or 10 miles more lightning strikes per day or on average than we had. That hardly ever happens. Last year when the survey was done again, the Four Corners down close to Disney came up with the number one lightning strike moniker, if you will. The reason that we get all the lightning strikes is the same reason that I just addressed with Rachel. It's sea breeze driven. It really, really is. We have abundant moisture on either side of our state to contribute fuel to the fire. If you can lift it, get the clouds growing and get the instability going. And that's what happens every single day for 6 months out of the year during the mean season. East Coast and West Coast sea breezes collide again, leading us to active thunderstorm days and lots of lightning. Not the lightning capital of the world, that is in South America, but and sometimes in Africa. But we are the lightning capital of North America. That's the I-4 corridor right here in Central Florida. All right, let's talk to Leah Reedy. Leah says, can a high-pressure system be created? If so, could this redirect hurricanes away from the coast of Florida? Oh, Leah. Or Lee, I'm sorry. That just doesn't work. It's hard to create a high-pressure center. It's hard to create a low-pressure center. On a global basis, we don't have the ability to control, make air sink like that. It just doesn't happen. If we had that kind of ability, we would control the world even more than we do now. Can you imagine if we actually could control the weather and send bad weather to our enemies or freeze them out or block hurricanes from ever hitting our coast? We would still need hurricanes to transfer heat from the tropics into the mid-latitudes toward the poles to keep the globe from overheating. That's what hurricanes actually are. It's a big transfer of heat. But if we could keep them from ever making landfall, what a difference it would make for me, you, everyone. And might put me out of a job. I don't know. If we could control the weather, why would we need the weatherman, the meteorologist? All right, next question comes to us from Pinky Bennett. What do you mean by atmospheric river? Okay, that's a great question. We hardly ever get affected by the atmospheric rivers here in Central Florida. There does come a time every now and then that the Pineapple Express will shift farther south and come across Central America and the Gulf of Mexico and feed into Central Florida, but hardly ever. What we mean by an atmospheric river is a setup of moisture churning from one direction toward the other. Sometimes here we'll end up with thunderstorms that I call them train in, like a railroad train. Railroad tracks, you get a lot of thunderstorms forming on a cold front or something. They train in, they rock over here from the Gulf Coast and come right across Central Florida to the northeast. Atmospheric rivers do the same thing, just on a wider scale, and normally happen on the Pacific coast of America. You get a setup with moisture surging in from the Pacific, equatorial Pacific, into like California, or maybe even Washington State or Oregon, and that becomes what we call an atmospheric river, where day after day, more and more moisture is coming in along a frontal boundary or a big low that's spinning, forcing moisture in. And they get inundated with floodwaters because of all of the high rain amounts. It's a mess. And that's what they mean by atmospheric river. Hardly ever comes to Florida, but every now and then they tag us. All right, here's a good one from our friend Julie Tillman, who says, just curious, why do so many rains bypass us? We live outside of Tavares, just off 441, about a quarter of a mile from Lake Eustis. We see many rains headed our way from different directions: Leesburg, Grand Isle, Mount Dora, Asatula. They get close, we hear thunder, it gets breezy, but more times than not, we get a few sprinkles and the cities around us get blasted. Is the chain of lakes causing this? Well, in a nutshell, Julie, I don't think the chain of lakes is causing you to not have rain. I think that it's you feeling like you're left out. I think over the course of 20 or 30 years, you're getting as much rain as Tavares, and you're getting as much rain as Asatula, and you're getting as much rain as all of your neighbors, because it almost always works out. It really, really does. I would be curious to know if you are measuring the rain and if you're keeping track of it. Like in my house, my yard has gone crispy critter on me this summer because all of the rain's been falling east. Over the course of the long haul, though, I do get as much rain, I believe, in Southwest Orange County as they do at OIA, because I keep track of it. I measure it, and I pretty much am knocking out 38 to 40, sometimes 45 inches a year of rain. And I really think that's about what you're going to end up getting to, somewhere between 32 and 40 inches of rain in your rain gauge. I would bet. Okay, thank you for the question, Julie. But I think if you'll check on it, you'll see that you do get rain almost as much as everyone else around you. Check on that and let me know. All right, if you want to join the conversation, just go to clickorlando.com/talk to Tom, and we'll have you on. Stick around. We'll talk to an expert from our friends at Climate Central. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everyone, to Talk to Tom. I'm Chief Meteorologist Tom Sorrells. If you are just now tuning in, we answered some of your questions in the first half of the show. If you want to submit a question, please do. We try to answer all of them. Anything you want to know, we'd love to talk back and forth with you. That's why it's called Talk to Tom. So submit those questions at clickorlando.com/talk to Tom. Today, on this part of the show, we're going to talk to a climate expert who says climate change is already being felt right here in Central Florida. So what are the fingerprints that are being detected in Orlando? We're here with scientist Dr. Daniel Guilford with Climate Central, who joins us now to talk more about it. Hello again, Dr. Daniel Guilford. Daniel, how are you? Doing good today?
I'm doing good. Thank you so much for having me again.
I mean, I'm glad you came back. Anyone who's associated with Climate Central is a friend of our program. For those of you who don't know, we do forecasting change every Thursday, or try to, on clickorlando.com and News 6. And part of that team, part of what I use every Thursday, comes to me from Climate Central. Love you, love you, love your organization. Let's talk about what you're saying is a noticeable climate shift. When you say that, what do you mean?
Yeah, so the weather that we are experiencing all around us, it happens over time. It's happened over the last 10,000, 1 million, many millions of years. But the weather that we are experiencing outside our windows today has been altered from that sort of natural background state. We call this a climate shift. We like to think about a shift because it's really a movement from one type of climate, the one we were used to, into a new climate where things have shifted towards a warmer side of things. Now, here in the state of Florida, we have been seeing on average about 1 degree Fahrenheit of warming in Central Florida per 1 degree Fahrenheit warming, sort of on a global scale. So on average, Central Florida has warmed about 2 degrees. And when we're talking about the climate shift index, what we're really trying to measure is how is the weather today different because that entire set of temperatures that we're used to experiencing has shifted towards the warmer side of things.
Right. So that's my question. I was saying, well, how are you measuring that? When you say we've warmed up 1 degree above the average global increase, how are you measuring that? Where are you getting your records? What are you doing? Explain to folks.
Yeah, so there's we use what we call a multi-method approach. So rather than just using observations of what we see in the real world by itself, or models that capture our physical understanding of the climate system, but don't necessarily have like today's weather built into them, we combine these approaches to have a more robust sort of set of estimates for what the climate 100 years ago was and what the climate today is. We know what the climate today is really well, and we know what the average global temperature was about 100 years ago. So we can sort of project back and look, what was the climate of Central Florida about 100 years ago? We know it was a little bit cooler, and we know the set of temperatures that we're used to seeing today. So we sort of shift those temperatures that we're used to seeing today back into a world with a cooler climate, specifically a world without greenhouse gas emissions. We are seeing temperatures that are on average about 2 degrees cooler, but that matters a lot more depending upon what temperature you're looking at, right? If you're sort of in the central part of the temperatures you're experiencing, on average, it'll be about 2 degrees cooler. But if you're in the sort of tails of the experience, the extremes, the very cold days or the very hot days, this shift is going to matter a lot for how likely you are to experience that temperature.
Well, here's like we're talking, Daniel. There's my problem is that if I say to you, explain climate shift index in 25 words or less, it's hard to do. It's kind of a convoluted thing, don't you think?
It is. What we're trying to do is really take what is happening at a global scale and project it down to the personal level to understand what climate means in your own backyard and sort of understand what that experience is. How different are the temperatures you're experiencing today compared with what they would have been if climate change had not occurred? That's what the Climate Shift Index is trying to do. It's trying to put a number on how likely the temperature you're experiencing today is in a world without climate change, or in a world with climate change, which is the one that we live in. We don't have that hypothetical world where climate change didn't exist. We don't live in that world, but we can use models and observations to estimate the set of temperatures that are associated with that cooler world. then compare those set of temperatures to what we have now.
Well, let's talk about Orlando, because it's one of my favorite subjects. I love Orlando. I've lived here like a quarter of a century. You know, my kids call it home. They all grew up here, raised my family here. I love Orlando. In the quarter of a century that I've been here, I think I've noticed changes. And I can just tell you right off the top of my hat, first few winters I was here, my yard did freeze. Plants did go down. They did die. I had to replant. There was a lot of that stuff going on. And then gradually the temperature rose, just not a lot, but a couple of degrees. And now in my house in Southwest Orange County, my philodendrons have not frozen to the ground since about 2004. And now they're huge. They're like 8, 10, 12 feet tall. And in the wintertime, we'll get in the 30s. Sometimes they get frostburned. They don't freeze. Talk to me about what you've noticed here in Orlando. What should we be looking for right here in the City Beautiful?
Yeah, so that's a great question. As temperatures are rising all over the globe, one of the things that we're really noticing in Central Florida is that overnight temperatures are getting quite a bit warmer, something like going up twice as fast as the during the day temperatures.
Oh, wow.
And the reason that matters is because we as human beings cool off overnight, right? We
Right.
like to regulate our body temperatures by cooling off while we're sleeping. Well, if the temperatures are warmer overnight, we just simply are not going to be able to cool off as effectively. And so in Orlando in particular, and Central Florida in general, we're going to be seeing these overnight temperatures, which mean that you're either going to have to crank up your air conditioning, which means a higher electric bill, or you're going to have to suffer through that higher amount of heat. Of course, ecosystems, anything that is sensitive to temperature will be affected as the temperatures around our community are warming, and we'll have to adapt to it as well. We'll have to think about, are we going to are we going to change our lifestyles, change how we're setting up events? Are we going to protect our workers that are exposed to this extreme heat as it becomes more common? These are all things that Orlando's going to have to take very seriously as our climate here continues to warm.
And I tell people all the time, when you get pummeled by pouring rain and you think it's raining harder now than it did when you were younger, you're not wrong. You're kind of right in there with what we're noticing as far as the climate impacts, the changes that you'll notice. We don't cool off at night. We're not freezing up in the winter as much. We are getting pounded with rain, like torrential rains like you've never seen before. That's all true. So what do you think we should do to reverse those trends, Doctor? I mean, I talk about it all the time and try to help out, and everyone wants to know, what do we need to do?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I would say that one of the challenges with climate change is that sometimes that experience that you just discussed of, oh, I think it's getting warmer, it's not necessarily as clear to everyone. And there's reasons for that. You may have lived in a different location for part of your life, or maybe you just haven't sort of integrated the changes around you into your own experience. Well, the Climate Shift Index is designed to put a number on those experiences and to allow us to talk about how climate changes are affecting our lives. And moreover, we think at Climate Central, one of the most important things you can do about climate change is simply to talk about it. That's why I'm really grateful for this program that you're doing, Tom, and sharing this with other people, which is that it's really important as we're trying to tackle climate change that we normalize talking about it, because we're not going to find solutions together to this collective problem without collectively coming together and having conversation.
Yep, I say it all the time. Yeah, I agree with you. I say it all the time. I think it's the biggest issue that's the least understood that we currently have. I really do.
Yeah, it's certainly a great challenge. And the more we talk about it with people in our communities, our faith-based communities, our local cafes, wherever you're spending time, if you're talking about the things that matter to you, climate will affect those things, whether that be your